In this life, I find that many of us, primarily of a young age, are often told that we are to set goals and aspirations, and that if we work hard, we'll bear the fruits of our labor and live the life we desire. Where we often go wrong here is focusing on the destination and not the journey. We fail to commit to the process and are instead emotionally attached to the results. This very thinking is a great cause for why many of us don't reach our full potential and are instead forced to settle. We live in a fantasy world where our dreams have already come to fruition instead of existing in the present and working for that vision one step at a time. Directed by the man that gave us the critically acclaimed cowboy bebop, Shinichiro Watanabe's Samurai Champloo stylistically illustrates in episodic fashion what it truly means to trust the process and commit to a journey. Oh, while also giving us a cool, refreshing introduction to the history of Edo period Japan with some hip-hop elements seasoned in. This 25-episode series follows the unlikely trio of Mugen, a conceited, free-spirited man from the Ryukyu Islands with a troubled past, Jin, a stoic yet gentle-spirited swordsman, and Fu, a young, determined girl that acts as the mediator between these two on their quest to find a samurai that smells of sunflowers. Poetic, isn't it? Our journey became possible when the worlds of all three characters collided at just the right time at a small restaurant where Fu was watching the days go by working as a waitress. Prior to their encounter, our main characters later confessed that they weren't up to much, but instead were merely going through the motions. Fu knew she wanted to set out on this adventure, but admits she could never build up the courage to do so. Jin was traveling in search of something, but admits even he does not know what he was looking for after leaving his dojo. And Mugen, of course, was just up to no good. However, on that one fateful day, when Fu was working as usual, conflict broke out with a group of samurai after she accidentally spilled tea on a customer. With her life now in danger, Fu strikes a deal with Mugen, a mysterious man in the shop with no money, to save her in exchange for free food. Mugen is happy to oblige and begins wildly slashing away at the samurai, revealing his loose, unorthodox fighting style that is reminiscent of breakdancing, which is the absolute opposite of Jin's more technical approach. The situation gets out of hand when Jin arrives at the scene and is believed to be someone really strong by Mugen, who just so happens to have a passion for fighting strong opponents. During their close combat fight, the building ends up destroyed and they wind up killing the son of the local magistrate, pausing the fight for the time being. The two wake up in holding as they are to be executed. Here, Jin confesses that Mugen is the first person he was unable to kill. After a dramatic rescue effort, Mugen and Jin escape and are ready to finish their fight when Fu stops them. She convinces them to flip a coin. If it lands on heads, they have to help her on her quest of finding the Sunflower Samurai. If it lands on tails, they get to hack away at each other. After a dramatic coin flip that had sent it flying into the clouds, the coin lands as a mob of people looking for them arrive in pursuit. The verdict? Heads. And so the journey begins with a race to escape their pursuers. When I think of a short series, meaning one that's 12 to 25 episodes, give or take, I expect the series to be condensed and straight to the point. Samurai Champloo says screw that, we're taking 100 detours, solving endless conflicts along the way, getting captured a few times, giving history lessons, and while we're at it, playing the most entertaining game of baseball the world has ever seen. There's even this great recap episode based on Mugen and Jin finding Fu's journal. That was really creative. The series is a modest 25 episodes covering our group's journey across an anachronistic Edo period Japan. While it is episodic, there are 4 2-episode arcs and a concluding 3-episode arc to end off the series. While the goal of this adventure is to find a samurai that smells of sunflowers, throughout most of the series he is hardly mentioned. Whenever questioned about him, for most of the series, Fu manages to avoid giving information about this man, who we later find out is her father. Her father, whom she hardly knows at all, since he abandoned the family when she was very young, leaving them to struggle as Fu's mother became ill and passed away. Frustrated, Fu decides to go find him and give him an earful for her mother's sake. While watching this series, I find that the lack of focus on the goal helps me come to enjoy the story more than I would otherwise. When recommending this series, I always make it a point to tell the potential viewer not to worry about where the story is going, that they should just enjoy the journey. To illustrate my point, let me bring you back to an experience I had a little over a year ago in every weeb's wet dream, the land of the rising sun, Japan. It was early in the morning on a rainy day in Tokyo when my beautiful friend Slice and I were heading to the station to get on a Shinkansen bullet train to take a trip to Kyoto, the old capital. The travel time was 3 hours, which wasn't too bad, especially considering we had been on a 12-hour flight just to get to the country. But the point I'm trying to make is, those 3 hours opened my eyes to how beautiful Japan is. Looking out the window of the train, speeding past small towns and seemingly endless nature, I had an amazing experience, one I wouldn't have gotten had I been focused on the destination. The journey is more enjoyable when you take the time to enjoy the process and not simply focus on where you're going. Both opportunity and disaster are imminent along a journey, which is similar to how side quests work in a video game. To truly enjoy a game fully, you should experience the optional side quests. No true journey is simply linear. A journey isn't a straight line, but rather small changes in direction and speed that might make the ride longer, but the conclusion can become so much sweeter. Samurai Champloo wouldn't be nearly as enjoyable if it was a more goal-oriented series. Not only with this series, but with anime series where characters are after a goal, if you look below the surface, it's not only about that specific goal, it's about how they grow, who they become, what they learn along the way. That is why we should set goals. Not only for the success or completion of them, but to grow. It's not just about becoming the Hokage, the Wizard King, the #1 hero, or the Pirate King. It's about the experience along the way, and how our characters grow. And I think Samurai Champloo illustrates that point perfectly. At the end of our journey, when the samurai that smells of sunflowers has been found, he's very sickly and frail. Seeing him in this state causes Fu to change her mind about really giving it to him, meaning the end goal of finding her father and giving him all her frustration was only partly met. Still, Fu, Jin, and Mugen are at peace and content with the outcome of their journey. There's a powerful lesson in that. While what was desired wasn't completely met, our characters all walked away with something. Jin, a man that had been lonely his whole life, confesses to Mugen that he has found his first friends. Fu now has a solid conclusion with her father and has found her own courage, and Mugen has found someone really strong that he does not want to kill. Okuru, a man from one of the many tragic arcs, while traveling with Fu said that, once you travel with someone, you become family, like brothers. Such a simple statement is so true. Our characters went from total strangers, two of which wanting to kill each other, to good friends with a mutual respect and care for each other. To some viewers, one big flaw of the series is its repetitiveness, but I believe this can be overlooked if you go at it with the right perspective. Some repetitive themes you can expect in the series are hunger along the journey, Fu getting kidnapped, and tragedy. I'd argue that hunger and poverty are to be expected because, well, our characters are far from rich. They're just travelers earning the bare minimum amount of money needed for them to survive as they go, which we're reminded of often, and as a viewer, I appreciate it because it gives me a sense of realism and a look into what life might have been like for travelers in these times. Up next, we have Fu and her magical skill of being kidnapped. Now, this never bothered me because I just saw it as humor. Fu is a young girl with no prior experience of being alone in the world, so of course she is naive. While she's often poking fun of Mugen and Jin for being useless bodyguards, she knows she couldn't make it alone. Samurai Champloo is an adventure comedy anime, but there is a lot of tragedy depicted in the series. There's a good balance of lighthearted and more serious episodes, which are all great, but the themes of the darker episodes are just exceptional. One of my favorite episodes is episode 7, which tackles the ethical choice of doing something bad for the good of someone else. It is centered around a young man named Shinsuke, with no father and an elderly mother who is very sick. Unfortunately, he's unable to find a place willing to hire him. Desperate, he decides to resort to pickpocketing and having a middleman fence for him to get money for medicine. His mother, who's unaware of his illegal means of getting medicine for her, isn't getting any better. The doctor informs him that the medicine cannot cure her, but will at best help her regain strength. Shinsuke is told that there are better medicines, but they cost 100 times as much as the current one he buys. And of course the doctor has a business to run, so he can't cut Shinsuke any favors. Shinsuke's luck runs out when he pickpockets Fu, and shortly after a gang of an illegal drug they were transporting. The gang bumps into him right after Fu confronts him. The local law enforcement notices the mess, and to escape, Shinsuke takes Fu as hostage into a nearby building. Fu tells him that she understands what he's doing, and that his mother would be heartbroken if she knew. The gang, after their drug, breaks into the building, followed shortly by Mugen and the police. After an altercation, Shinsuke escapes the building and tells Fu to remember him as he runs away. Some law enforcement pursue him, eventually cornering him and killing him as Fu, who followed from a distance, watches. There are many episodes like this where, yeah, the main cast makes it out alright, but for others, things aren't so sweet. The series takes place in an anachronistic Edo period Japan, meaning events, people, and other things are not in chronological order. It should not be treated as a substitute for a history book by any means, but instead as an introduction to Edo period Japan. After watching, you might want to do your own research to learn more, which I would encourage you to do since ancient Japan is very interesting. Not to say that modern day Japan isn't as well. An example of historical accuracy is that the Edo period was a time of prosperous peace in Japan. This allowed a lot of economical growth, and the people began to live better. This also led to the creation of more restaurants and street vendors because people started to eat out more. And there are many restaurants, bars, and vendors in Samurai Champloo. Other historical accuracies range from mentions of the Shimabara Rebellion, the history of Moronobu Hishikawa, a Japanese artist that popularized the ukiyo-e paintings that I'm sure you've seen at one time or another, and policies on immigration and trade. Among other accuracies, the series has numerous mentions of homosexuality's history in Japan, which I found to be very interesting considering the climate of it in Japan right now. Samurai Champloo beautifully brings together the looseness of hip-hop and the reservedness often associated with Japan. The combination of traditional Japanese folk music and hip-hop really elevates various scenes throughout the series. The journey of Fu, Mugen, and Jin leaves a lot to think about, and it is definitely a series I would recommend to all of you, or anyone that is looking for an anime focused on adventure and comedy. For those that have already watched it, I would recommend you a fairly new series, Golden Kamuy. Not only is it an adventure comedy, but it's also set in the Meiji period of Japan, which is right after the Edo period, funny enough. Like our main cast in Champloo, I encourage you all to chase your dreams, whatever they may be, but also make sure to take time to enjoy the view on the way to your final destination. And if that destination isn't all you'd hoped it would be, I hope like our characters you have the strength to continue on to whatever may come next. Like Fu and her journey, I wish I could continue talking about this series forever, but this is the end of the video. In the comments, go ahead and share your dreams with the class, and let me know what you think about what is one of my favorite anime of all time, Samurai Champloo.